Okay, so first of all, let's begin our today's class. For today's contents, we are going to look into topic 2, tutorial 2, which is on your GDP as well as the concept of unemployment. So before we look into GDP here, I would like to do a quick introduction about different ways for us to measure GDP. So when you look into GDP, or we call it as gross domestic product, we are referring to the value of total outputs in the country. Okay, so from a layman term, let's understand what is GDP first. GDP means gross domestic product. That means I look into the total values of the goods and services in the country. Or in short form, I can call it as total outputs. Now, let's have a look into this scenario over here. Like for example, okay, we have this baker over here. He produced bread. Okay, so then he sell this output to this lady. Okay, she's interested to buy. So she used some money to pay for the bread. Okay, so you can see there's an output bread over here. I'm not too sure why it keeps like that. Ayuh. If not, right, you all may switch on TV. So at least I think it's more stable to watch from TVs. Yeah, you can switch on from the buttons at the back. Hey, you press one more time. You press one more time. Okay, so therefore, I see TV is more stable. So we have to refer to TV. Okay, so press one more time. Yes, it works. Okay, so this baker over here, he produced bread. He sold this bread to the lady, and the lady will spend the money on this baker. So you can see there's output over here, and there is expenditure over here, right? Now, this baker has the money already, right? Has the money ready. Okay, so that's his income. So therefore, he can use the income to buy meats from this butcher, for example. So he pays the money to this butcher and he give him the meat. So again, you can see there's output over here and there's expenditure. So once the money goes to this guy over here, he has the income. So he can use this income to buy, for example, candle from this lady. So he pay for the candles and this lady will give the outputs and this lady will get the income. So do you realize that we have three components over here, which are outputs, expenditure, and also income? So we can say that output is always equals to expenditure and always equals to income. So therefore, we have three ways for us to measure GDP. Okay, which are output approach, income approach, and expenditure approach. Okay, now we can look back into our tutorial questions or tutorial notes. Okay, so hold on. Let me post this up. Okay, now let me share screen on my iPad. Give me a while. So the first thing you need to know when you will learn about GDP is to understand the definitions. So the definitions is that when you look into GDP, refer to the market value of all final goods and services produced in the country in a time period. So remember, we are not looking at the number of outputs on it, but we look into it in terms of the market value. So it is called price times quantity. Okay, market value.
So we use GDP to measure countries' performance over time and to compare the standard of living between different countries and between different years. We just say that we have three ways for us to measure GDP, which are expenditure, income, and output approach. When we look into expenditure approach, we look into the total spending in the economy. So when I say total spending, it means what? It means the total demand in the economy. So we just say that total demand means aggregate demand. So therefore, when I say expenditure approach, that means I add up all the consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. The four components that we referred to in the previous class. Net exports means exports minus imports. So expenditure approach means I look into aggregate demand. The next one is income approach. Income approach looks into the income that's being earned by our factors of production, like land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurs. So we are referring to the domestic income at the factor cost. Okay, so like for example, net wages for workers, profits for companies, sole traders income, interest that you earn from the investments or banks, and also rental from the rental of land, except transfer payments. Now, what is transfer payments? You will come across this term very often in the upcoming chapters. Transfer payments means like those unemployment benefits. Like for example, if you are registered yourself as unemployed, then you are eligible for the unemployment benefits. Okay, eligible for the financial assistance. Think about that for example in our country, right? Last time we have this BRIM. So for example, if 1 month you earn below a certain category, then you are eligible to claim for the BRIM, which is the financial assistance. In econs, we define transfer payment as a negative withdrawal. Why we define that way is because transfer payments are basically money that's being paid by the government to the people who are eligible, right? So where this money coming from? It's coming from our taxes. So we pay taxes to the government, and the government will use this money, okay, to help the people who are in need, like those who are unemployed or those who are poor. Now you see, government give out money to them, right? Did government get back any goods and services in return? No. Okay, so therefore requires a withdrawal because these money are not being coming back to the economy directly. Okay, because government give the money to the people who are in need and they did not get any goods and services in return. So therefore, requires a withdrawal from the economy, right? Now the next one is output approach. Output approach means I either look into the final goods and services or by adding up the added value of every firm's output to a white double accounting. So for example, this is an apple. An apple is $2, and this is a cup of apple juice that is $5. If I just add it up, 2 plus 5 equals to 7. But there's a problem now because this $5 over here, it takes into account of the $2 of the cost of apple. So that means that when you calculate 2 plus 5 over here, this $5 already included the cost of apple as well. So the cost of apple is being included twice. So therefore it's not accurate. Okay, so therefore we have to take into account of the value added parts. For example, here the cost of apple is 2, the price of the apple juice is 5. So here we know that there is a value added of $3. So therefore, if I want to calculate the GDP, okay, I should just use $2 plus $3 equals to $5. So that's more accurate, $5. Okay. Or another way is I just take this value of final outputs. Value of final outputs. Okay. So it's either I take into account of the value added parts with the cost of apple equal to 5, or I only take into account of the value of final outputs. So that's what it means. Final value of goods and services, or taking into account of the added value parts to avoid double counting. Okay. However, now here we say that all these approach should equal to each other. That means the expenditure approach should equal to income approach and should equal to output approach. That means the value that we get should equal to each other. But in reality, it's very hard to achieve that. Why? Because due to statistical discrepancy. That means some transactions may go unreported, for instance, like those illegal activities are not being recorded. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to know. Now comes to this part. This one is very important. You might want to put 3 stars over there because it came out in midterms and final exam last time. What are the limitations of the real GDP? Okay, what are the things that have been omitted by GDP here? Okay, so therefore, what you need to do is usually this is like a 4 marks question in which you need to give 1 point, 1 explanation, 1 point, 1 explanation. So every point is followed by an explanation. So for example, the first one is GDP does not take into account of household production. So what do you mean by household production? Like for example, think about like for example your mom. If let's say your mom is a housewife, she does the house chores for you. House chores the service as well, but she did not charge you money. So you see, these are the things that are not being recorded. That means as long as the service or the output is not being traded, it's not being recorded. Like for example, your mom may do some cakes for your neighborhoods, for example. So that is output as well, but it's not being recorded. She does housework for us. Okay, that's also not being recorded as well. Okay, so therefore this requires household production. Okay, so it ignores the value of the non-marketed services. So I have put up some keywords for you to develop your answers in your explanations in the bracket. Yeah. Now, the second thing is it omits the undeclared economic activities. Like for example, maybe people smuggle cigarettes or alcohols, and all these are not being recorded as well. Or you may have some income from some sources, but you do not declare your income tax. So therefore, with all these are not being recorded. Like for example, people evade from tax, running away from tax, or they do illegal activities. So therefore, these are not being recorded in the GDP. The next one is GDP does not look into health or life expectancy. What is life expectancy? Life expectancy means on average, the lifespan of a person. That means on average, how long can a person live? Okay. So again, GDP only looks into the total value of outputs. It does not look into the life expectancy of people. So again, this is something that GDP omits. The next one, leisure time or quality of life. Again, GDP does not tell us the full story. Okay, we do not know how well people live, right? So the standard of living and the well-being of people are not being recorded as well. GDP does not tell us about all this. For example, a country could have a very high real GDP, but the thing is, people may not have good access to healthcare, or may not have good access to good standard of living, for instance. Now, environmental quality also another thing that GDP ignores because they do not look into environmental quality. Like for example, the country could have a very serious pollution or resources are depleted. Again, these are not being recorded. Again, real GDP also does not look into freedom and social justice. Like here we talk about equality and equity, which is not being recorded as well. And what's the most important is GDP does not look into income inequality. You see that, for example, in the country like UK and US, the GDP is very high because they are developed category. There's a very high real GDP per person. But that's what we assume on average. But in the country, we have some people who are very rich and some people who are very poor. So therefore, the gap between the rich and the poor can be quite huge. But this is something GDP does not even take into account. GDP does not have all this people. Okay, so these are the limitations. Depletion of resources means you don't have the resources already. All the resources have to use up. Resources like the jungles, the oils, the forests, all these being used up. Okay, now let's have a look into the tutorial questions for the GDP first. Okay, later we have another part for unemployment. So the first question over here is that you are being given this table, and the first question is to ask you to calculate the value of GDP. So this is specifically asking you to use the different approach that you learned to calculate the values of GDP. Okay. Now, to decide which approach to use, it depends on what data you are being given to. You have this consumption, government spending, investment, private investment, inventories, exports, and imports. So, what approach that you should use in this scenario? What approach you should use? So what approach you choose? Expenditure, correct, because you have consumption, investment, government spending, and everything. But bear in mind, you need to calculate. So therefore, to calculate value of GDP, we use the expenditure approach. Okay. So expenditure approach, we look into aggregate demand equals to consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Remember, you have to calculate net exports, which is export minus import. So therefore, these two things you need to minus each other first. Then only you get your net exports. Okay, this one is to calculate net exports. Okay, so therefore, you add all these up. Consumption plus government spending plus investment plus inventory and plus net exports, you will get this final value. Okay. It's not so crowded now. Oh. You know, my earlier class, AM one, today still got new student coming in one. Today first class, join in today. Weird, right? They start adding in students, wait. No, it's still 35 students. Last week 33, now 35. So I jealous like other people's class, right? 20 students, 25 students. Okay, now next question. Explain 3 examples of transactions that will not be included, okay, in the GDP. So what are the things that are not being included? Underground activities, that means like illegal stuff, okay, second-hand goods and non-marketed transactions and intermediate goods and services. What are intermediate goods and services? Intermediate goods and services are like goods, raw materials that you need to use it to process. So we cannot use it for the final consumption yet. Remember we said GDP, GDP means total value of the final goods and services. We only look into the final goods and services that are used for final consumption. So intermediate goods are not for final use. We need to process first. So it's not being recorded. Now, so therefore, the question is, next question, what is the difference between final goods and services and intermediate goods? Okay, and are intermediate goods included in the measurement of GDP? So very simple. Final goods and services is for final use or final consumption. Intermediate goods is to further process or manufacture or resell. And as we say, GDP only looks into the market value of all final goods and services. So therefore, the intermediate goods is not being reported in the GDP. Okay. Now, next question. This is the kind of midterm questions or final exam questions. Okay. With this question, first of all, you need to understand what's the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP. Nominal GDP means is based on current prices. Okay, based on current prices. Real GDP, as you see the word real means adjusted for inflation. Adjusted for inflation. That means I want to remove the effect of inflation so that it can give me a better figures. Okay, why I say so? You see, when you look into GDP, you say it's about the total value of final goods and services. When I use the word total value, how do we calculate the total value? When you talk about value, you use price times quantity. So therefore, if we look into GDP only, if the country is having high inflation, the prices will be high, and therefore this will push up the GDP as well. Then this can be misleading because that is not what I want. What I want is when GDP increases, that means I want to have more outputs. But if the country is having high inflation, the price is really high. Therefore, it pushes up the GDP. That's not what I want. So therefore, if I look into nominal GDP, it is very misleading because the figures can be very big. So it can be misleading, telling people that oh, the country is doing good, but it's actually not. It's caused by high prices. That is even different. So therefore, I do not want the high GDP is caused by higher prices. I want the high GDP is mainly caused by higher quantity. So I do not want this to change. The price should not change. I want to make my prices constant. So therefore, I can see that today the rise in real GDP is caused by the rise in quantity. Then only small accumulate. So I want to see if today the quantity makes any changes in the increase in GDP or not. So I have to make these prices constant. That's what we call as real GDP. So therefore, because adjusted for inflation means this is based on constant prices. Based on constant prices. So I have to take the prices from a year with no inflation and deflation to take it as my reference price, or we call it as a constant price. So therefore, once I adjust it, then therefore, if there is an increase in GDP, then I can say that it's caused by higher quantity. So let's look to this question. So assume 2000 was chosen at the base year. 2000 was chosen at the base year. Base year is a year with no inflation, deflation. That means it's a good data for us to use as a constant price. But of course, in reality, we use 2010 as the base year. Okay, so therefore, complete the above table. First of all, we do the table first. Okay, so we want to calculate the nominal GDP. So this one very simple. You use the outputs and the price. Output and the price. Output times the price. Okay, so therefore, times it. Okay, then you add it up. This will give you a value of 240. Next, okay, next one. I want to calculate real GDP. I use this quantity times what? Times the constant price. The price is 2000. Okay, output times this 2000. Output times this 2000. I mean times the price the 2000 here. So therefore, the math here simple one. Okay, you add it up. So you can see our real GDP is usually slightly lower one because it adjusts for inflation. Okay. So therefore, our next question here, they ask what is the value of nominal GDP in 2001? So here is the answers. What is the real GDP for 2001? Here is the answers. Now the next question is important. What is the GDP deflator price index for 2001 and for 2000? My first question for you is what is GDP deflator? GDP deflator is for us to look into the average changes in terms of the prices of goods and services. It's basically for us to measure inflation. Hey, but there's one question. Then what is the difference with the CPI, Consumer Price Index? If you learn macro before, you learn about inflation, And one way for us to measure inflation is to use consumer price index, CPI. So if CPI can use to measure inflation, and here I also say GDP deflator can measure inflation, then what's the difference between GDP deflator and CPI? Bear in mind, from your midterms, right? She already asked something that she has not taught you all one. So for example, in my previous semester, right, we got two sets of different midterms. So some people might got C1, some people might got hardest one. Okay. So therefore, right, in the hardest one, right, there's one question she asked about CPI in midterms, but she has not taught you all yet. CPI is in the inflation chapter. So she asked about what are the limitations of CPI. So if you did not learn once before, then you highlight. Yeah, she just bear in mind that she will ask something that's really out of the topics or out of the levels or something in the later chapters. But no risk for CPI, you can read from the inflation chapter if you want to. Okay, but I'm just telling you that she might ask something that's really beyond your current syllabus. Okay, so what's the difference between GDP deflator and CPI? GDP deflator, we look into the changes in the average prices of goods and services that are produced domestically. Okay, so you see when we talk about GDP deflator, as you see the word GDP, we look into the value of outputs that are produced domestically. So therefore here we look into the average changes in the prices of the local goods and services, domestic goods and services. But for CPI, okay, we look into a basket of goods and services that are consumed by the majority of the households. So we do not look into all the local goods and services, but only a basket of goods and services. And bear in mind, for GDP, we look into domestic goods only, but for CPI, there could be imported goods being taken into account in the basket. Okay, so that's the difference between GDP deflator and CPI. Okay. But of course, if you want to know about the limitation of CPI that used to come out in midterms, go to the notes that are uploaded, go for the inflation chapter. There's already a part on the limitation of CPI, just for info. Okay, but that's not my focus for today's part. I'm just introducing what is GDP deflator. So GDP deflator, once you calculate, you get an index. Index means like you start with 100. 100 is a base. So that means no inflation and deflation. Above 100 is inflation, below 100 is deflation. Okay, now how do we calculate GDP deflator here? Very simple, we use the calculations 240 divided by 230 times 100 to get the answers. Okay. This is the GDP deflator for 2001. What about for 2000? For 2000 is the base year. So it will equal to 100. In base year, no inflation and no deflation. Okay, now you get these two values. The value for the GDP deflation price index for 2000 is 100. The GDP deflation price index for 2001 is these figures. My question for you is this. Can you tell me what is the inflation rate then? You see already, right? Because you have these two values, you use the new value minus the old value divided by old value times 100. So 104.35 minus 100 divided by 100 times 100. So here, that is an inflation rate of 4.35%. This is the inflation rate. Inflation. Okay, that means on average, prices. Okay, now this mini homework over here, I would like you to go back and try out by yourself. So for this one, right, it used to come out in final exam. Okay, so I would like you to when you revise, try this out by your own. I have already provided you the answers over here, but you try to see if you can get the answers correct or not. But I just want to do one example for you. So let's say here you have 3 years, you have 2010, 2011 and 2012. Okay, you have three outputs. You have three items over here. You have the output and the prices. So the first one here, GDP of 2010 prices. Here we assume that 2010 is the base year. So base year is the year with no inflation and deflation. So here my nominal GDP equals to the real GDP because it's base year. So very simple, I can just do the calculation. 6 times 1 equals to 6. 10 times 0.5 is 5. And 2 times 5 is 10. So added up. Is 1. Okay, but in 2011, you can see here there are GDP of 2011 prices. That means it's in the year. So this is based on current prices. So this is nominal GDP. Okay, nominal GDP means based on the current prices. But here we ask about GDP of 2010 prices. That means based on base year. This is what I call as based on real GDP. Okay, so therefore, we can do calculation here. Okay, 5 times 0.5 is 2.5 based on current prices. 12 minus 15. Okay, 9.5. Then how do we calculate real GDP? We use the constant price times the current output. Original price times the current output. Original price times the current outputs. So here is 5. 0.5 times 12 is 6. And this is going to be 5. Five times 3, 15. So here this is my real GDP. Okay, so you can continue to do the rest and then answer the rest of the question. So this is an extra work for you for revision purposes. Okay, make sure you try to do this. This is important. Okay, now we will move on to the next part, which is on unemployment. Coming here.
Can I watch recording?
Okay, but I'm not sure whether it is recorded well or not because I haven't tried the recording system in this class.
Oh,
Take a chair.
who already the other side 3 classes.
Wait.
Then I and this
No.
one side.
Take this chair because I just set this chair just now. So you take space. Space. And then you just sit here lah. You just sit here. Choose one of the chair because I just sit here so it might be hot. So yeah, then move this one. Then yeah. Okay. Okay, so the next concept that we look into will be on the unemployment. Okay, so first of all, you need to know what are the definitions. Okay, what is the definition for unemployment? Now in econs, we define unemployment specifically. First of all, we say that unemployed are the people who are unemployed when they are able and willing to work, but it's just that they are unable to find a job. So that means that we cannot simply say, oh, today I'm rich, so therefore I do not want to go to work. That's not considered as unemployment. Here we say that you are able and willing to work. It's just that you haven't found a job yet. That means if a job is being offered to you, that means you are very likely and you are happy to take it up. Okay, so that is the definition as defined by international labor and organizations. Why I specify that is because next time when you collect data for your research, when you go to World Bank, right, there are different metrics to define unemployment. So the one that's most accurate one is based on ILO one. So when you go to this kind of data, okay, you have to search for the unemployment metric based on ILO. They will be more accurate. Okay, because we define unemployment based on this econs definition over here. That means people who are able and willing to work, but just that they haven't found a job yet. Okay. So therefore, these are the people who also register themselves as unemployed. That means they are claiming for unemployment benefits as well, the financial assistance from the government. Okay, now what's most important in this part here? The first thing is the theories part. The types of unemployment. This is important because it comes up. She loved this part so much that she asked a lot in final exam questions in the essay part, like 15 to 20 marks like that. A lot about unemployment theories. So the first thing you need to know is about the types of unemployment. Like for example, the first type is called frictional. Now, frictional means temporarily unemployed. Okay, like for example, you are fresh graduate, you are searching for jobs. That's called temporary unemployed. Or let's say you leave your jobs and looking for a new job. That's also called search unemployment, which is temporary unemployed. Or you are in between jobs. Like for example, you are a lawyer, but let's say in this month you don't have any new case, so therefore there is no income for you. So you are temporary unemployed. You are still a lawyer, but it's just that in that month you do not have income. Think about like actors or actors. You shoot for movies. Okay, let's say this month no director comes to you to shoot for movies, then you are temporarily unemployed in this month. You are still an actor, but just that no job in that particular month, in that particular period. Okay, so you need to know the examples here. Make sure you know how to explain it in details. For example, search unemployment. Okay, search unemployment means you are searching for jobs like fresh grads, or you are leaving your job, so you search for a new job. Seasonal unemployment like fruit pickers. Fruit pickers, like during winter, you cannot harvest fruits. You cannot pick fruits, right? Fruit pickers during winter, no job. Okay, or casual unemployment, spelling error here. Casual unemployment. Casual unemployment is like what I said just now. You are a lawyer, but you don't have any new case in this month. So therefore, you do not have any income. You are temporary unemployed, but you're still a lawyer. Now, on the other hand, we have structural unemployment. Structural unemployment means it arises, it happens because of the changes in the demand and supply of your skills and occupations. So short forms, you can think about like a fall in the demand for your skills. So let's say if there's a fall in demand for your skills or for your industry, therefore you are being structurally unemployed. Like example, your job has been replaced by technologies. Okay, that's what I call as structurally unemployment. Now, example here, technological unemployment. Like nowadays, you go to cinemas or Aeon, you can see that all the cashiers have been replaced by the self-payment kiosks, right? So cashiers have been made technological unemployed, or you can call it structurally unemployed. The demand for the cashier is not there. Okay, so this is what I call as a fall in demand for that particular skills. Okay, another one is like regional and international unemployment. Like for example, you stay in Penang, you work in Penang, and your skill is only demanded by your current company. But one day your company has moved to KL. But the thing is this, you cannot move to KL because you have family commitments. Okay, so therefore you are being regionally unemployed. Or let's say your company that you are looking for is in Malaysia, okay, but now it has been moved to, for example, Singapore, but you are not able to move because of family commitments. And other than the company, there's no other company would like to hire you. So therefore, that's what we call as internationally unemployed.
So therefore, overall, you can see that structural unemployment means it happens due to a fall in the demand for your skills. That means no one demanding for your skills or no one demanding for industry. Okay.
The last one is cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment means that it's caused by business cycle. That means it's usually associated with a slump or downturn in the economy, as shown by a fall in aggregate demand. That means 3 keywords over here that shows that economy is not doing good. So cyclical unemployment or demand deficient unemployment is caused by business cycle. Usually it's a downturn in the economy, as shown by a fall in aggregate demand. So economy not doing good. So usually in this scenario, we call it as like a recession. Usually when the country is having recession, then you will have this cyclical unemployment. Now, my question for you is this. During pandemic, due to COVID-19, people lost jobs. So which type of unemployment it belongs to? Think properly. Hey, do we really have recession?
Afterwards, that's the second.
You see, recession means your GDP goes negative. So our GDP does not go negative during the pandemic. It's only getting lower, but it's not negative. It's still positive, but at a smaller figures. That means GDP is still increasing, but at a slower rate. If your GDP goes negative, they only require as recession. So therefore, when people lost their job during pandemic, right, the actual type of unemployment is still considered as fractional, because we call it as temporary unemployed. You are only unemployed during the period of pandemic due to the COVID-19 over here. We cannot call it as cyclical because we do not experience recession. It's not the slump in the economy. It's just that the economy slowed down, but it's not go to the recession yet. Okay, so to be exact, we call it as fractional actually. Okay, so there's one extra information over here. Okay, now the next one is some formula that you need to know for unemployment. Okay, first of all, when you look into labor force, we use employed plus unemployed. Okay, so that means when we want to look into the people in the labor force, we look into the people who are employed and people who register themselves as unemployed. Okay, so remember, you have to take into account the unemployed people. Now you see, like you are already reaching the working age population. Let's say after 60, you're already reaching the working age population. But are you in the labor force? No, because you do not register yourself as unemployed. So you see, you are belonging to this working age population. But it's just that you are not active in the labor force. You are not in the labor force yet. Okay, so therefore, if I were to calculate labor force participation rate, so I want to see on average how many people join the labor force out of a total of working age population. So I use labor force divided by working age population times 100. Okay, so remember, you belong to working age population. It's just that you haven't joined the labor force yet. So sometimes they might ask you why. Why is that? We have this group of working age population, but they are not in labor force? Answers can be like, for example, they go for education, pursue higher level of studies like you all. Okay, so that's one of the example here. Or they become a housewife. Okay, so therefore they do not join the labor force. And how do we calculate unemployment rate? We use unemployed people divided by the labor force to see how much of people are being unemployed as a proportion of the total labor force times 100. So now let's have a look into the questions over here to see the application part. The first question, what is the participation rate for 2003 and 2004? Has the participation rate increased? So very simple, participation rate, we use the labor force divided by working age population times 100. You get the answers. Same thing, labor force divided by working age population times 100. You get the answers. So you can see from 65.48% to 67.25%. Yes, there's an increase of 1.77% in the participation in the workforce. Next question, what is the unemployment rate for 2003 and 2004? Okay, so same thing as well, and they talk about whether unemployment rate increase or decrease. So how do we calculate unemployment rate? We use numbers of unemployed divided by labor force times 100. Okay, same thing. Use the number of unemployed divided by labor force times 100. So yes, from 6.36% to 7.83%, there is an increase in the unemployment rate as well. Now, let's talk about this extra question here. Why does unemployment still persist even when the economies are experiencing strong economic growth? That means when the country is doing good, reaching near to full employment, the potential capacity of the economy, but there is still unemployment. Why? The answers for this question is due to this NAIRU. Now, what is NAIRU? NAIRU means natural rate of unemployment. That means that although the country is doing good, there will still be some people who are unemployed. And these sorts of unemployment are what we call as the frictional unemployment, usually frictional or structural unemployment. Now, remember just now we say that, like, for example, you are an actors or actress or lawyers, right? You see, not every month you have a job. Sometimes you may not have job because no one finds you for a movie or like you don't have any new case. So therefore, although economy is doing good, but still in certain periods you do not have jobs because no new clients coming to you, for instance. So therefore, this is what I call as natural rate of unemployment. Even the country is doing good, but still there are some people temporarily unemployed. Usually it's frictional. Okay, but here we also consider structural as well. So that means even though the country is reaching full employment, there will definitely be some people who are being unemployed, who are either frictionally unemployed or structurally unemployed. But right, if the country has frictional or structural unemployed, that's okay. Okay, it's not very severe, it's not very serious. But if the country has a very high cyclical unemployment that's caused by the economy not doing good, then only it is a concern. Okay, so frictional and structural is naturally to be there, so it's okay. Yeah. Now, next question. Based on your opinion, what ways would you suggest to reduce NAIRU over time? Now, we just say that when we say NAIRU, natural rate of unemployment, that means we are referring to frictional and structural unemployment. So this question is asking you what are the ways to reduce frictional and structural unemployment. I can play around with the words by asking you what are the ways to reduce unemployment. The answer is the same. So bear in mind, in exam midterms, they might ask you what are the ways to reduce unemployment. Okay, so it's the same answer as well. Again, every point must be followed by explanations. Like for example, first one, increase in the mobility of labor. Now in econs, when you see the word mobility, you can use the word occupational mobility and geographical mobility. So every time you see the word mobility in econs, you can always explain using these two terms. Occupational mobility means that it's easy for the workers to switch between different jobs or different tasks. Like for example, today they do task A, then tomorrow they can do task B, so they can switch between different occupations or different tasks, more flexible. But of course, there are some limits. You can't expect a dentist to become an engineer, right? But at least they can switch between different tasks if it still belong to their same industry. Okay, so we want labor to be more mobile so that they will not easily to become unemployed. Or we can make workers to be more geographical mobile. Okay, like for example, by having better transportations, infrastructure, and so on, so they can move across different locations. Okay, now the second point is to provide education and training. This is one of the students' favorite answers. So every time when you say how to reduce unemployment, you can say we can provide education and training because this increase the skills and qualification of workers. Therefore, people will become more productive. Then people become more productive. The next one is to reduce the power of trade union. Okay, because trade union, if they are too powerful, like in those Western countries, in UK or US, when they are not happy with their government regulations or with their boss, they can just simply go to protest. And they can just talk to their boss and say, hey, if let's say you don't want to increase our pay, we can just choose to stop working for you. Okay, so therefore, if trade union powers is too strong, it's not a good thing for the country. So therefore, people can just choose to be unemployed if they are not happy with their job.
So therefore, if we reduce the power of trade union, then it can help to reduce unemployment as well. The next one is to reduce the unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefits are the financial assistance to the people who are unemployed. So if we reduce the number of claims or the amount of unemployment benefits, then chances are people have no choice but to go to work. Or a cut in income tax, which give an incentive for people to work. Because when there is a cut in income tax, then the more you earn, then the more you can keep, that you can spend. So that can be an incentive for you to work. Okay, usually students love to write which point? They will love to write training education, reduction in unemployment benefits, and a cut income tax. Make sure you know how to explain it. Choose any 2 to 3 points that will be sufficient. Okay, now let's move to the next question here. Explain why every economy experiences unemployment. Draw a business cycle and indicate the stage at which an economy will experience unemployment. Indicate and explain recession gap, and inflationary gap. Okay, so therefore you can see that this is the graph here. Okay, on my y-axis is real GDP, on my x-axis is years over the time, years. So when your real GDP is increasing like this, it's called expansion. Once it reaches the top, we call it peak. And once it slows down, we call it as recession. Once at the bottom, we call it slump. Okay, now the curve here, the curve up and down is what we call as actual GDP. What we produce actually every year. Overall, you can see that the graph is going upwards. So therefore, when you plot this line over here, the trend line over here shows it goes up. Okay, and therefore, this is what we call as our potential GDP. Overall, the potential GDP is going upwards. Okay, so this is like what we call as potential GDP. Okay, so therefore, like example, let's say now the country is at the peak here. The potential, the capacity is only here, the green color points. So therefore, here we can say that the actual outputs that I'm producing is way larger than the full capacity. The actual output is way larger than potential outputs. So we call it as inflationary gaps. So actual outputs, I put it as Y. Potential output, I call it as YF because that represents full employment. So therefore, when my actual outputs is larger than potential outputs, here, this one, larger than this one, we call it as inflationary gap. That means that we have used more than our capacity. So in this period, unemployment will be low because everyone will be employed. There could be high inflation and there could be shortage of resources. Things are not enough. Okay. On the other hand, if let's say we look into this part over here, your economy is operating at the slump, the black color points, and the potential GDP is here. So you can see my actual GDP is way lower than potential GDP. So here we call as deflationary gap. My actual output is way lower than full employment. Okay, so therefore my actual output is lower than my potential outputs. So that means you're operating below the capacity. Okay, so there could be a lot of people being unemployed, inflation may be low, but there are a lot of resources that are not being used, spare capacity a lot. Okay, next question over here is the same question as what we mentioned in the beginning of the class in terms of the limitations of GDP. Provide a brief explanation for 2 reasons why certain economists contend that GDP does not provide an accurate measure of the country's standard of living. So that means we talk about the limitation of GDP. So you use that the same answer as the beginning of the class, but make sure you know how to explain it. You know the points, okay, but make sure you know how to explain. Like for example, you say GDP does not look into income inequality, okay? Like for example,
GDP only looks into the market value of goods and services, and therefore, the standard of living are not being recorded. For instance, the rich may be too rich or the poor may be too poor. All these are not being recorded. Okay, because GDP is just only making an assumption on average how much each person is earning on average in the country. Okay, so these are the point forms. Make sure you know how to explain. Like one of the students' favorite point is like this one. Shadow economy. That means the transactions can go unrecorded because people do not want to report the taxes to the government. Okay, like for example, they might do some illegal activities or underground activities. They go unrecorded or to evade from taxes. You play around the answers. You have the points anyway. Just need to know how to explain it. So make sure pay some attention to this question. Okay, now, as I told you before, your lecturer, right, loves to ask something that's really beyond the syllabus. So what happened is, right, last time in your final exam, right, final exam only have 20 marks for your calculations. Last time it used to be 40, but last semester she changed it to 20, but not too sure about how about this semester. So what happened is, this is the example that she only put it in after being complained. So there was one semester, right, she asked in final exam, she asked about this question for 20 marks. So the entire 20 marks of the calculation is this one, and she never thought about this at all. And this is not even your syllabus. So that means the whole 20 marks people cannot score. So at least now you need to be aware of this. She really do something like this, and it's really gonna complain already. Every semester she gonna complain. So that's why this question only being added in after being brought up, because she asked something like this in the final exam. Okay, 20 marks. Now what happened is, for this question, right? Okay, you have A, B, C, D, E. A, B, C are okay. Question B and question E are a bit weird. Even like when we discuss among tutors, right, we're also not sure where she got all these formulas from. So, but no choice, so we just stick to the solutions that she provided. Okay, but at least you need to be aware that she will really ask something like this, randomly. Okay, but no worries. Let's try and see how many marks at least you can score if, let's say, this really comes out in your finals. So you are being given with this data. Okay. First question, calculate GDP. Now, to calculate GDP, you have to use either one of the three approach: income approach, expenditure approach, and output approach. To decide which approach to use, it depends on what data you are being given. So by looking into this data, which approach that you think you should use? So at least you see whether you can score at least question A or not. What? Yes? Yes, someone say something? What? Yeah, income approach. Why we say it's income approach? Because, yes, correct. Based on the data that you have, it's about wages, income from rent, profits. So all these are the income of the factors of production. So we have to use income approach. So here, at least you can score question A. Not bad. So although she asked things randomly, at least we can score something here. Okay, so therefore, here we use the GDP. We use the what we call as the income approach, and then add up wages and salaries, income from rent, dividend, interest, and profits. Remember, do not take into account of transfer payments. Transfer payments are not being included. Now, second question. What is GNP, gross national product? What is the difference between GDP and GNP? Again, she didn't teach, assuming it's final exam. It's not a syllabus anyway. It's a surprise to you all in the finals. So what's the difference between GDP and GNP? Oh. Yeah, that's why a lot of people leave it blank. Yeah, I really hope you need to come out things like this way.
Only one semester, is it, or like
Last semester, this one was the semester before the last one. She came out like the most extreme one now. Last semester was okay, only a few questions that she asked a bit weird. Yeah, but stay manageable.
You're not too sure what's wrong with her. Like she seems very unhappy with her batch, right? Like a few days ago, some tutors asked about what to do with the assignments because we need to form groups, right? Then she said that okay, we let the students decide let them decide what they want to do. I'm not going to micromanage them this time. They are already an adult, so let them decide what to do. But what we can do is we just form a 4-person in the group. Something like that. And she seems like macam tak happy lah. Why But she says she doesn't want to micromanage law. And she asked the people not to campur tangan also this time.
Only our batch.
So last time she got facilitated one. Yeah, she asked everyone to form a group with 10 people. But this time one group 4 people. But let's go decide lah. You don't want to do, then you want to do.
Huh?
She said like that lah. She said you want adult already mah. Then you ask her that lah. Then can you get the marks and whatever I want. Yeah, I don't know why she changed her attitude like that. Big 3 only though. You know, she so
the workload was same for 10%.
from experience only 4%. Only the group work part is you do it in group, but the assignment is individual. Like you need to teach the people how to do financial independence, how to save money. So that one you do in group. But individual, the report is individual. But the good thing is you need to score. I can give it high because this kind of assignment you get higher than one. But the group work part you need to have 5 persons. The workload about the same role, but just that less people in one group. She said, this one you want to do a free flow one, this one. Okay, so what's the difference between GDP and GNP? You want to try not GDP and GNP, find the difference. Yes? Like? Show your difference one. Okay, see the keywords. What's the keywords? GDP and GNP, domestic and national. So you see, GDP only looks into the value of goods and services that are produced domestically. Right? Like for example, here if we look into income approach, we only look into the income that's being earned by the factors of production in our country. Alright? But when I say GNP, I don't care where you are, as long as you belong to the residents of the country, I will take into account of the income. So that's called as national here, GNP, gross national product. That means here we look into the income that's being earned by our factors of production, regardless of where you are. You are a labor, for example, you could be working in Singapore, in UK or US, but I will want to take into account of your incomes. Just now, GDP do not take into account that because GDP only look into it domestically. But GNP, we look into it globally. That means we take into account the incomes that you earn even though you are outside the country. So therefore here, we use GDP plus net factor income from abroad. We take into account of the income that you earn from abroad. Okay. Now the next one is national income. So this one, we just use the gross national product minus depreciation minus indirect tax. Okay. Now these 3 formulas are still okay. But question D and E, let's see if we can find out a bit any problems or not. Because we realize that the question D, the formula macam not so right. Okay, let's see. Okay, personal income. Even Marina also want to comment about question D. Because we realize got some problems. Okay, see, when you want to calculate personal income, we use national income plus transfer payments. Okay, correct? Because transfer payment, you got the money you can spend, right? Okay, we add it back, correct. Minus corporate profit tax also can, but minus EPF. You see, EPF is something you pay when you start working, right? 11% of your money will go into EPF. But this EPF is for your retirement purposes. You can get it back after you reach your retirement age at the age of 55, for instance. But when you go and minus it, a bit not so correct. But don't try, this is solutions. So we stick to these solutions now. Okay? Minus income earned but not received, correct? Because you earn the money, but the money is not sent to you yet, so you cannot take it into account. Minus social security tax, that means minus not so, also can. minus undistributed corporate profits, okay, and plus any money that you have received, although you have not provided both yet. Okay, that still makes sense, but only this part a bit tricky. I'm not too sure why you should put negative. Okay, so get these answers. Actually, you are not supposed to ask about calculating personal income in this kind of question. Too sure why I should ask about this. Okay, the next one, personal income, personal disposable income. That means I want to reduce for taxes. So I use personal income minus personal income tax. I got this figure. But actually, question D and E are not a good question. We do usually ask the question to calculate personal income and disposable personal income from this kind of tables. No, she didn't even teach. This is not in the syllabus one, but she asked in final exam, then she got a complaint like that. Huh? Cannot, because this come out in finals, you cannot talk to anyone after finals. You can only talk to campus central as a complaint. So it's a complaint, hope not like this, 50 marks. Okay, so these are the things that you need to know for your tutorial 2. Yes. Yes, question. Yes, compare minus 这个与这个是same thing as well, and then GDP deflated price index 就用回这个方式。没有you try to go back and write it down, then you can find answers. Recession and inflation. Recession means fall in real. Okay, both come up if there's recession, there will be deflation. Makes sense. But both means different things. Deflation means price going down. Recession means a fall in the total outputs, a fall in the value of the outputs. That means GDP goes negative. But both happens together in the same situation. Yes. Any other questions? Okay. Now, what I want you to do is remember when you revise for your tutorial 2, make sure you do the extra mini homework. Okay. Sorry again. Inflation is volume first and recession is so to be exact, inflation requires a fall in the price level of goods and services. We don't call it as a prices of the item only, but we call it as price level. On average, all goods and services fall in prices. So yeah, correct. And recession means a fall in the value of outputs. Less outputs being produced. Okay, so now first thing you must remember to do the mini homework that I mentioned in the tutorial just now. Okay, now before we take attendance, I want to talk about the group forming for the assignment. Meanwhile, let me stop recording for this one.